For years now, churches have been measuring the same things. How many people showed up on Sunday morning? How much did people give? Those metrics are important, but they're not the only things we can be measuring. In fact, we think it's important that we start measuring some of those metrics that really matter. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the 8 metrics that we think your church should be taking a look at. We hope this conversation helps your church reach more people and grow. This is the Reach Right Podcast. Well, hey guys, welcome to the Reach Right Podcast, episode number 92. I am your host, Thomas Costello, and with me, as always, is my co-host,
Ian Hyatt. What's up, Thomas?
Hey, Ian, not much, man. Excited to talk today. We're going to be talking today about how you can track the church metrics that really matter.
Right.
I think church metrics are such an important topic. We've talked about this in the podcast. We did an episode you may want to check out earlier this year about new metrics to be tracking in 2022.
Yeah.
But today we're talking about how you can track the ones that really, really matter. I think it's going to be a good conversation to be digging into. There are so many metrics out there that churches can track. And I think there's been a movement over the last decade or so where we've realized that some of those traditional metrics are not enough to just count those things that we used to count. Right. And anybody whose primary metric was how many people are sitting in pews on Sunday morning, they really became sad over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, except for a very small number of them, many churches saw a huge decline in their normal Sunday attendance. I think, we talk to churches all the time, and I've heard maybe from 1 or 2 that said that they immediately grew during the coronavirus pandemic. Yeah. But I've talked to hundreds of them that have said, we're down 20%, we're down, many are still down 60 or 70%.
Oh, yeah.
Just huge.
We saw the average. I remember we covered this. The average church is at 30 to 60% of where they were pre-pandemic. So that
totally
was
crazy, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So if that was your metric, you probably have quit already. If that was your only metric that you measured, you're probably not in the ministry anymore because, you've fallen down. And obviously we're saying this in tongue-in-cheek because a lot of that was out of our control. I know a lot of our audience is really struggling with that.
Of course.
Just as an encouragement, this is you were not responsible for a global pandemic. That wasn't something that you made happen there. But I think one of the solutions is maybe reevaluating the things that you're measuring and making sure that you're really measuring what matters. And that's the hope today, is that we want to measure those things, helping churches measure the things that really matter. And so for this conversation, we've kind of broken it down a little bit differently from how we've done it before. And it's a different conversation too, but we have 4 categories of measurements, 4 different categories. And then we have a few different ideas for each one of those categories of things that would kind of fit in there. Some of them you're probably measuring already. Maybe some of them you're not really measuring, but I think all of them could be really valuable to churches there. So I'll go ahead and start us off though. The first category is it's important that we measure new engagements. How many new engagements are you making? And this is emphasis on the word new and then also on the word engagement. This is something that's kind of a buzzword in churches right now, is we're measuring how often are people engaged with our church, that they're having kind of an interaction with our church. And I think this is important because recent Barna study says that 1/3 of Americans are what they remain unchurched, like not de-churched, not people that have been in church and have left or are part of a church, but they are never really been involved or had an experience in a church. So 1/3 of all adults remain completely unchurched. And so these new engagements as a metric is really that measurement of how many people are we able to make an engagement with for the first time? So would you agree it's an important thing for us to be measuring?
Absolutely. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. This has been a buzzword for a little while, the word engagement for churches. Actually, even pre-pandemic, this had emerged, but the pandemic accelerated, obviously, the need to track engagement because we were engaging in a different way and not engaging physically. So, absolutely agree. It's very important.
Yeah. So here's some of the things I think that we recommend if you're really trying to measure new engagements. The best measurements are, so number one, I think the obvious one for churches that are meeting in person.
Yeah.
I think, which is most churches out there. I know that a lot of us are still doing online services, and I think that's fantastic. And we're all for online campuses. We did a couple of episodes a few weeks ago, just all about how to really nail that and do that well.
Yeah.
But I think for most of us, our best discipleship experience is still happening in person, and so measuring first-time guests. That's a lot of that's one of those things that is so important to be measuring. I have argued for a long time that most churches have a front door problem, not a back door problem.
Right.
Just the natural ebb and flow of churches. You're going to have people that leave your church, not even for bad reasons. God willing, you won't have mass exoduses in your church, but people will move away, people will pass away, and generally speaking, churches will move towards less people being there than if people aren't coming in the front door. So most churches have a front door problem. Measuring your number of first-time guests, I think, is really, really an important thing to do, and seeing that number regularly increasing is really important. So number of unchurched people that you're reaching. So you can... I think that's an important thing to measure. It's a little bit detailed, so you'd have to figure this out and find ways to measure whether this person was part of a church before, or are they a transplant from another church. Ideally, we want to be reaching, mostly unchurched people.
Right.
But you know what? I'm going to be the first to tell you that I know there's a lot of stigma around this, but there are a lot of people that are de-churched or hurt by churches that really need a place to call home. So reaching people, again, we don't want people that are just, they like your worship team better, so they're going to move after 10 years of this other church. But there's a lot of hurt out there, and so reaching these kinds of people with new engagements, that's really important. And then here's one I think that has really grown in importance is online engagement. That's something that we really need to be measuring now. So this is going to be things like, I think if you're measuring new engagements, you can look at first-time visits to your website. That's really important. How many views are you getting on YouTube, on social media? How many likes and this kind of engagement? How many new followers do you have? Subscribers on YouTube? These kinds of measurements, I think, are really valuable. What do you have to add to any of that?
No, I think one thing to touch on, going back to number of unchurched people, you might be able to find that when they're filling out a connection card or checking out your new members class or new believers class. So we didn't maybe touch on that, because that's a kind of unique one there. So that might help some churches out there to know. But no, I think that, for online engagements, what you just kind of finished with, we definitely churches started to track that because they were forced to when the pandemic happened. So I think I've been encouraged to hear how many churches are still tracking that. And so it is important, even though you don't know, even if you get a video view, if they're watching the whole message or whatever, still good to track, still good to know the number for sure to measure things.
I think one of the mistakes that churches made, and I don't know if you heard this in the beginning of the pandemic, I think churches, we finally really got a taste of the power of the internet. And these guys, we would all go online the first few days and we would look at it and we would have these people that were pastoring churches of 100 people, and they go online and they look at it and they say, we had 700 people watch our service this week online. What an untapped potential. Now, I think the thing to remember is that there's a different value in an online view. Like, you can't measure them the same. And I saw all these schemes that people would say to help them feel better about themselves with their metrics, and say, well, we have 100 people coming to our church on Sundays typically, but we had 700 views, and those are all families, and there's probably 4 people at each TV watching it. So really it's like 2,800 people were at our church this last week. It's not the same to do.
We are now a mega-sized church.
Our tithes are still the same. It's not we're not mega-sized tithes, but as far as attendance, we are through the roof as far as growth. I think that there's not a good measurement to compare. 3 online views is worth 1 in-person view, or 1 in-person view is half and I've seen all kinds of numbers out there. They really are their own category, their own metric. Don't try and meld them together into one number, because it really is something different, but all of them are good. Every one of those is engagements. And I think what you were saying too is important, though, making sure when you're measuring don't get, when you look at just your number of views, that's valuable. But like Facebook, for instance, one of their most important metrics is a 3-second video view, right? So if you're putting your entire live service onto Facebook and it'll tell you that, oh, you had 400 views on that, a lot of times it's going to be like 360 of them were 3-second video views.
Right.
And while that is still better than zero, not having a view, I suppose.
Right.
Don't make the mistake that that's someone that stayed there and interacted with you the entire time and had a gospel experience necessarily like if they were in person. So again, all that to say, it's a different metric, but all of these are engagements that we should be measuring and trying to see growth in these areas.
That's good. I'll hit the next one, which is a good next one here after talking about engagement. That's you need to measure new connections.
Yep.
So engagement is someone's first interaction with your church, kind of a newer visitor, and new connections would be someone taking a next step after that to them taking the action, not just them seeing you or touching you, but them taking some sort of a next step. And this is very important because if we're not careful, we can end up tracking and measuring the same people cycling in and over again. You want to know who are the newer the people getting connected for the first time. So we have some ideas for that for sure. Obviously, the connection card has been around for a long time, and I hope churches are using the connection card. I should say a long time, good amount of time.
Can I ask, what is your church? Do you guys do a physical connection card or is it a text connection card?
QR code? A QR code. They could do a physical one, or we have a QR code as well. For them to scan, and then they go to the...
Like it's up on the screen there, like you hold out your phone and scan it if you're new?
And the QR code is on the connection card as well.
And I've seen some churches do it on the back of the seats in front of them, like there's a QR code you can scan. Is that you guys? You have that?
That's it. Yep, absolutely.
Oh, gotcha.
So that's the way we do it. So,
but you have a physical card too that someone could write their name and number and that info in?
Yeah, absolutely, because obviously some people still don't do the QR code or whatever. So
I think that's right. I think doing all of the above is probably the right way to do it. We're wrestling with some of this at our church of just like, what do we do? Because our primary way is text new to this number. And I think that's a little bit, like sending a text is a little bit more, it takes a little bit more work than putting in your number into a form. It makes them take more initiative than filling out a form or writing their name there. So anyway, I was curious about that.
No, that's what we do. And I think it's the same. I think my mindset and philosophy of saying when you get online giving going, don't take away physical check writing or giving.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Let there be options for different folks. So yeah, absolutely. So that obviously if someone emails or through email opts in, obviously to start following emails there. Attendance, obviously, at a new members class, next steps type class. They register for a small group. They participate or sign up for a service or project, serving or an outreach or something like that. So those are all next physical steps that someone takes after they've been engaged. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, again, all of these are not number of people in the seats, right? These are different measurements than that. I think these are what they have in common is that they're all very simple steps. Like, so, we all know that like no one is like opting into your church's email list doesn't lead you into heaven. Jesus made no promise theologically about the opt-in there, but it is a super simple thing that helps you measure the number of people that are kind of like are putting their toe in the water, right? Yep. So they've come and now they're like ready to just kind of get in there a little bit and see how it's going. And I think that's really important to be looking at how many people are taking those kinds of steps, because it leads to the next one, which I'll kind of start with here, is that we need to be looking at some of the discipleship steps. Yeah. So measuring, that was more of like the practical steps of getting involved. The discipleship steps are more of the spiritual markers and measuring some of those. And I think most churches measure a lot of these already. I think that's something that we've been doing for a long time. But I think that this is even more important than it's ever been. Again, so it's not measuring number of people watching, but it's measuring the number of people that are are making actual decisions. And I know that, like, so some of them just as ideas are number of salvations, how many people said yes to Jesus, number of baptisms. My 2 cents on this is that the number of baptisms is a lot harder number to fudge with than the number of salvations. Because I've been in ministry for so long, right? So I've pastored, I've preached a lot, I've led a lot of people to make a decision to follow Jesus. And you and I know, we've done ministry together, Ian, that a lot of times it's, I can count some people that I've led them to Jesus like 11 times.
Oh, yeah. Right? They raise their hand every time. They get saved every Sunday.
They'll stand up. They'll go to the I said yes booth. They'll do all those things. But over and over again, they'll decide to follow Jesus. And baptism is harder because people will generally not choose to get dunked over and over and over again. And this only works for our audience that is... well, I guess it's a helpful measurement whether you do baby baptism or not, or believer's baptism. But I think that either way, baptism is one of those things that, in general, should be done one time for your life. Nothing wrong with a second time if you're recommitting, I suppose. But it is a real measurement. So salvations, baptism, I think group attendance, I think is a good kind of discipleship. Like how many people are going to groups, how many people are making that decision to join a group for the first time. And then here's another unique one that I think is, a lot of churches don't really measure this, but I think when we have a holistic view of what the function of a church is, it's for all seasons of life. So things like baby dedications, marriages, funerals is, I know we want to increase our funeral number. No pastor is out there saying, like, let's try and get more funerals this year. But I think that those kinds of things are important to measure because they show you how the kind of impact you have in people's most sacred moments of their lives. Dedicating a baby, being married, a memorial. Someone chooses their pastor or their church to be the place where that happens. You don't want to go to a random church for your parents' memorial service. You don't want some random minister doing that. You want your person, the people. So measuring those kinds of pastoral care elements, I think those are really valuable. All of them fitting in with kind of that discipleship steps. So looking at some of those, I think, are really important.
Because these how to measure people going deeper, which, like you said, I mean, that's vital. I mean, that's what every church wants. And it's funny. You mentioned us doing ministry together. I remember when we did a couple of things. When we did baby dedications, that was like our highest attended Sunday. We just decided we needed to we were trying to get the church off the ground, right? We were planning a church, you and I, here in the Austin, Texas area, and we're like, wow, that worked for getting more people out. We need to do more baby dedications. But
so we would just stop people on the street and say, hey, has your baby been dedicated? Bring them on in. Let's do it. Bring your whole family.
So that's good. And the baptism thing too. I mean, I agree with you. There's been, even in a small group setting, even in a more intimate setting, I remember helping someone take a step and trusting in Jesus. But when it came to baptism, they're no, I'm not ready yet. So and to this day they still haven't. And that was years ago. So these are next steps that are deeper commitments. So that's good. And that's, I guess, a good transition to the last one here, which is, and this one's a little interesting. I thought you and I were talking about this one here, but spiritual growth. So we've talked about discipleship steps, but obviously now that people have taken those deeper steps, whether or not it's in a small group, they got baptized, then are they growing? Are they bearing fruit? You want to make sure that, and this is kind of where we talk about closing the back door, right? If someone is in continually, serving in your church, staying involved, committed to the mission, ongoing, that's real growth that's happening. So, and this one at first I was like, well, what would those metrics be? I think that we go a little bit deeper with these. So ones that we see are giving. Obviously, giving is a big deal. I think that we've known this for years in ministry that, someone can attend and even, be very involved in a small group or serving, but that giving just does not happen. So it is a big step in showing an individual's spiritual growth, that they're trusting the Lord with their finances and being obedient to that. And so that volunteering, of course, obviously if someone's volunteering, they're not just putting their talents, but they're putting their time and effort, and they're walking that out. So that's a big metric of spiritual growth. How many leaders do you have? Number of leaders. That is a big deal, I think, too, because how many, what is it? What's the statistics that I'm botching mentally right now? But it's, in 100% of people, only 10% of people are doing the work, right? They say...
it's usually 80-20, right? That's what I usually hear, is that you have an 80-20 principle, yeah?
Right. So, if you have, good, healthy amount of leaders, that shows that as well. So these are some key ones. Yeah,
I agree. I think that churches have always measured giving, right? So that's something that's obvious. I think thinking about it a little bit differently, not just, the thing we usually measure is, hey, we had X dollars this month.
Right.
We had more dollars last month and less dollars from the previous quarter.
Right.
That's it. That's important, so you want to measure that. I think more measuring people and their giving, right? So now I'm of the persuasion, the whole time I pastored, I never looked at individual gifts. That was it's kind of a commitment I made to the Lord. I'm not saying it's wrong if you do, but I just didn't want the temptation to have to cater to certain people's will, or I didn't want to filter what the Holy Spirit was saying to me through how much somebody gave to our church. So I never knew how much anybody was giving to our church at any given time. But that being said, I think that there is value in looking at the number of people or families that are giving, not so much total amounts, but the number they're giving. And then it's probably important to choose an amount in there. Like, you don't want to just measure, we had 300 families gave, but 100 of them gave $10 or less, right? Because they put in a $5 bill or something like that at one point. So that's a valuable number. But I think a more valuable number would be choosing some kind of an amount that represents a sacrifice for the average person, maybe. And again, this is so hard to figure, because the sacrifice for someone that makes $200,000 a year is different from the sacrifice of someone making $30,000 a year, right? So it's just a different beast. But trying to find some kind of number. So maybe it's people that gave $1,000 over the course of the year here. They gave $1,000 this year, or $100 a month, or something like that on average, and measuring that number and seeing which direction it's headed in, using it as a trend. That's something that we can kind of say, this number of people they really are bought into what we're doing at the church. They have spiritually grown to a place where they're giving an amount that actually means something. And again, it's not a perfect metric, because to someone who makes $1 million a year, $1,000 might not really be that sacrificial for them. It might be like someone else giving a 20. But it's something that I think you have to kind of draw some lines somewhere. So measuring that, I think, is great. Volunteering, I think, is probably one of the most valuable metrics that you can possibly measure as a church now, because it's something that if someone is bought in, they're going to be giving their time towards what's happening at the church there. So I think that this is something that every church should be really, if I was going to hone in on one metric, I think that would be the one for 2022, is how many people in total are volunteering within our church. And how can we see that number grow? A great measure of people's spiritual growth there.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Good. Anything to add as we close up about things we should measure, or should we be measuring? Anything to say?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it at that for this week. Thank you guys so much for being a part of our Reach Right family. We hope this has been helpful to you. If it has, let us know in the comments below. Rate, review, subscribe, do all those kinds of things that you can do. That just helps us to get the word out there about the Reach Right podcast, and we want to help as many churches as possible with this. So
helps us measure things too.
Helps us measure. Yeah, we're measuring every bit of it. That's right. So thank you for being a part of our Reach Right family. We hope to catch you guys next week. We'll see ya.